You are listening to the Pencil and Paper Podcast Network.
You're listening to the Horror Ramblings Podcast, the show about all things horror. We hope you enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Horror Ramblings Podcast. I'm your host, Lester, whatever you want to call me, joined, as always, by the wonderful Stephen White. How are you doing this morning, Stephen?
Apparently, I'm still tired, even though I had a big cup of coffee. But I'm all good.
I'm finishing up a gallon of apple cider that we had here at the house. So, no coffee this morning, but some apple cider, which I'll probably regret later, knowing me. But you know,
it's okay.
Shit happens.
It gets through your system. It cleans you out.
Yeah, you know, that's why it's wonderful. It's good for you in a roundabout way.
Sure.
So, anything new over on your side of things? I know that you finally watched a movie that I've been excited for you to watch, and I know we're going to talk about it, but
I did kind of want to touch base on something before we get into that I want to express a love and desire for other people to go check it out, and it's not free per se, but I think it's worth it. So we had John Brennan on the show a few weeks back, and he casually dropped some information about Yuki and John's Patreon Buffet, which is their new podcast and show and thing that they're doing over on Patreon. Well, it dropped back on Halloween, and they put out 3 episodes throughout the week just to kind of get people started. One was just some... John and Yuki were kind of talking about ghost stories and things like that as they were carving pumpkins. You can do video and you can do audio. Then there was a second drop where Yuki was just telling stories about himself, like John was pretty much interviewing him, and he was just telling personal stories about himself, like how he went from Japan to America, like his desire and dream to be in Hollywood movies, and do all that stuff. And then the third one was, it kind of had this jokey vibe where they were talking about the Elmvis tree, where the ghost of Elvis is hiding in this tree out in Graceland, and just the way it was done, it kind of had this very serious, but you knew it was in a very satirical way about how they were presenting the story of the ghost and all the facts about the ghost being there. And I mean, that was amusing too, but I got the most kick out of listening to Yuki's stories. Like, as soon as it was done, I was like, I want more of this. I want to hear more of his stories, because John wasn't lying when he said he was a fascinating individual with tons of stories. I cannot wait to hear more, because just the stuff he said, like in 40 minutes, I was captivated. I was like, I want more of this. I want to hear more about this. And obviously their ghost stories and stuff were pretty fascinating too. I don't know if I've ever mentioned this on the show before, but I'm a very skeptical person when it comes to ghosts. Like, it's one of those things that I would like to believe, but there's just some elements to it that are a little hard for me to kind of make sense about, versus something like aliens. I'll believe in aliens all day. It's hard for me not to believe that with all the planets and systems out there in the universe, we're the only ones. Bullshit. I can't buy that. Now, whether or not they are traveling in spaceships to Earth, that's a different story. But I wholeheartedly believe there is life on other planets than this one. Somewhere there has to be.
I always find that really interesting, for the simple fact that I have a ton of friends who it's either they believe in aliens and they don't believe in ghosts, or they believe in ghosts and they don't believe in aliens. I don't know too many people that don't believe in either or believe in both.
I think it comes down to a spiritual thing, because normally when we think of ghosts, we think of the afterlife, we think of, religion and things like that. So I can kind of understand that. If there was a scientific explanation for me to understand ghosts in some kind of metaphysical, like the electricity and stuff like that, like I've heard, like they can kind of mess with electrical currents and things like that. If there was something about that that made me think that the passing of our physical bodies, and we had some way to project some sort of electromagnetic current into the world that we're still kind of floating around, sure, then I'll believe in ghosts. But just a spirit still links back to religion, and then that's something that I'm kind of disassociated with. So
I had seen a thing. This was some time ago. They did a study about how right when people die, there's like a change in their weight, like instantly, and they've seen like a change in the electricity in the air and things like that. And I can't remember which science. It might have been Bill Nye or one of those guys, that's real big and famous in pop culture. I can't think of the other guy's name.
Neil deGrasse Tyson.
There it is. Thank you. And I love hearing him talk about things.
Yeah.
But not very religious people at all. They're very scientific people, and they've all said the same thing, that they don't necessarily believe there's an afterlife, but they do believe that there could be a possibility that when we do die, it's a transfer of our consciousness. Our consciousness transfers out into the vastness of the electricity in the air. And I mean, the truth of it all is we ain't gonna know until we bite the big one, and we can't really tell anybody what's going on at that point.
And I don't want to dismiss anyone's claims, because John he brought up several stories about his encounters with ghosts, and I mean, you can tell he believes it. He believes that there was something there, and I wouldn't listen to that and just be like, "Oh, shut up, you're being stupid." I honestly want to believe, and I try to listen to these things with an open mind, so that maybe one day there's some element that I can start to explain all these stories, even if it's maybe not the way they see it, but it's something I can take and be like, put it in that situation, and then I can understand it from a different perspective. Like my grandmother, she was very spiritual and really kind of believed in a lot of afterlife kind of things. And one of the most fascinating stories she told me was after my grandfather died. She said that it was a few weeks after he passed that a cat showed up on their doorstep, stray cat. And the cat seemed like it was very friendly, didn't have that wild streak about it. And she said it had the same patterns as my grandfather, slept in the same spots where he would, nap during the day. He had the same kind of routine about when he'd get up and go do things throughout the day. And she's like, she was convinced that was him reincarnated as a cat. And I could not deny that from what she's telling me. It's a hell of a coincidence, but how do I explain the behavior of the cat? Normally stray cats just don't show up and be like, "Oh, I want to be your friend." It was like this cat was coming home and it was like, "Hey, I remember this place. I need to get in here and, get back to living the way I did." And it was just fascinating,
Yeah.
So,
I mean, the house that we live in now, we've had some experiences, and I've had some experiences in the past where, in all honesty, I can't deny it, but I kind of fall into that thing where I do believe that there could be ghosts, and I do believe that there could be aliens. So I kind of fall into both categories. But I mean, my wife and I were sitting watching a movie one night, and we live in a duplex. For the listeners out there, it's an upstairs and a downstairs duplex. It's all connected. We don't have to go outside to get to the downstairs. My parents live in the apartment downstairs, and my wife and I live upstairs with the kids. And we were sitting there one night watching a movie, and we hear somebody yell, "Hey, hey," and it didn't sound like anybody that we knew, and we were confused. And we go downstairs because I thought maybe my parents were messing with me, because that's just how they are. They like to mess with people. Both dead asleep, and to this day still can't explain it. I had a morning where I was laying in bed, and I always chalk this up to me being asleep, maybe still pretty heavy asleep, but my wife gave me a kiss bye. She left. I'm laying in bed, and I lay really weird when I lay sometimes. I was laying on my side, and I had my one hand up over my other shoulder, and I see fingers interlock with mine. And I'm like, oh, it's my wife, just getting some cuddles. And then I thought to myself, wait a minute, she's not home. And I turn around and there's nobody there. Like, it'd be weird for me to dream that, but
Sure.
And I had some experiences when I was a kid. My dad used to work at a old church, and we all had seen people that just sort of walked around a corner and disappeared and weren't there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't had any experiences in a long time, but I can't explain it. And I think that's where the skepticism comes in, because I'm not a full-blown skeptic. I am skeptic in certain situations.
Mm-hmm.
I do believe that anything's possible, but it's one of those things where if we can't explain it, then there's a chance that it can't be, because we want to be able to have an explanation for things.
Sure.
And sometimes unexplained things do happen. I mean, but yeah, no, I'm gonna have to check out their show, because I remember John talking about Yuki and talking about how interesting he was, and especially if they're telling ghost stories, because yeah,
well, see,
that's right up my alley.
He even kind of reinforced an idea that I guess I wasn't really 100% understood, but he was talking about like spirits and ghosts in Japanese, or I guess more or less Asian culture in general, that the black hair and the pale white faces and everything, I mean, that's very adherent to the culture. That's how they are perceived. And ghosts are not just, wandering phantoms. They're vengeful. That's in their culture, that's what they are. So that was fascinating, because I mean, we've seen like The Ring and The Grudge and things like that, but that's very much in the right vein. That's part of the culture. They aren't Casper the Friendly Ghost.
No.
But
and a lot of spirits, if you look back into a lot of different cultures, they're extremely vengeful. Like a lot of people think Casper the Friendly Ghost, but it's pretty far from the truth.
Sure. So I did want to recommend that anybody wants to go over there. They have 4 Patreon tiers. The 4th one, I mean, if I could had $28,000, I could drop on it. I'd be like, yeah, whatever. I'd help the guys out, but they have more affordable options. So you don't have to break the bank if you want to listen to the podcast, and then you can break down into, other accoutrements if you want or whatever. So I highly recommend it.
I remember John mentioning they were going to have like one like really high tier just for shits and giggles.
Just to see.
I mean, it'd be hilarious though. I mean, I like John enough to where if we would have, if we ever take off and make that kind of money, sure, why not? Let's check it out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even after hearing that, I'd really like to have Yuki on and try to figure out, because John's going to be like grilling him for stories, so we're going to have to figure out another angle, and hopefully he won't be repeating the same stories on our podcast if we can get him on. But I don't know, we'll have to figure out the maybe we can dig into ghost stories, because even talking about it now, I could think of a few that would be fun to kind of dive into here.
Yeah.
And I've got one in particular that's kind of crossing my mind, but I'm going to hang on to it, because I'm curious to know if our audience, seeing as how I think we have a sporadic listening base, who would know about this ghost that I'm thinking of. So I'm gonna put a pin in that. We'll come back to that. But
whenever you do that and you're like, I'm gonna hold on to that, I'm like, I need to ask him at the end of the show.
Yeah. Because it kind of got brought up in conversation the other day, and it was something I hadn't really thought about in a while, but, it'd be something worth exploring, and maybe even other little ghostly legends such as that. So,
I just got, as funny as it sounds, I just got a book. When I was in like middle school, there was a book series that came out called Haunted Ohio, and they write about different ghost stories all over Ohio. And I used to love reading them because, a lot of them happened around the area that I live in. Sure. So I've got a ghost story too. You'll have to ask Trina about it, because she knows about it too. It has to do with a certain road here around where we live.
Okay.
And she'll probably remember it. I don't see why she wouldn't. I don't think she was with us the night that it happened, but we all broke down on a particular road, and I decided to be morbid and tell the story, and I was freaking everybody out that was with us.
Yeah, she would have
So.
killed you.
Yeah, no, I don't think she was with us. I think it was I think I was with some other friends, but she knew the story too.
Hmm.
Like you are right about that though. If I would have freaked her out back in that day, yeah, she would have killed me. I would not be here having this conversation with you right now.
Yeah, no, her and ghosts do not mix. She absolutely is terrified of spirits and supernaturals.
Yeah, so Samantha's the same way. I don't necessarily think it's that it freaks her out per se, but I do think that she's one of those people that if she can't explain it, then it's not up her alley.
Hmm.
I know she doesn't like these. She can get through the first Conjuring. She does not like the second Conjuring. It actually does freak her out.
Yeah.
So, but you know, ghosts, demons, all that. I mean, again, we won't know till we bite the big one. So,
Or we won't know at all.
hey, you know, I mean, I saw an interview. It was Larry King and Stan Lee. They were doing an interview, and they asked. Larry King asked Stan Lee if he thought we went somewhere when we died.
Hmm.
And he said no. And he said he felt like when we died, it was just like being asleep and not dreaming. And Stan Lee said, that's the one thing, he was like, that's the one thing I can't wrap my head around. Doing nothing forever.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I hope you get reincarnated as some super awesome movie star and you start writing comics again.
Sure,
'Cause,
yeah.
God. But on to the subject of today. Today's just going to be kind of random, I think. We're going to talk about just horror in general. You know, we talked about in our first episode what horror means to us. And I figured we would just kind of chit-chat about horror in general, what we're feeling about the genre as a whole right now.
Hmm.
Before we jump into that 100%, I have to say, you finally watched Terrifier.
I did.
I watched the second one. I guess I just want to know what you thought of it. I know you told me that you weren't like particularly wowed by it, but you did dig it. So
Yeah, it was. I watched it, with kind of, I guess, a few expectations, which perhaps I shouldn't do. And I can't help that. When I start hearing things about movies, I like to kind of put them aside if I can. But I knew that I was going to have to watch this kind of on my own because I didn't feel like Katrina would be up for it, especially considering she hates clowns. So a killer clown, this brutal, I was like, well, this is not gonna work. So I had to watch it in spurts, but I did kind of watch it over the course of the same weekend. So it was just like a little here, a little there. So it was like 30-minute spurts. But I felt like it definitely had a very indie feel to it. It felt gritty, which I appreciated. The character of Art the Clown was, I mean, the guy playing him, I've seen pictures of the original guy. I guess it was in All Hallows Eve. And I'm kind of glad they recast because this guy has a look that's much creepier. I guess maybe it's his facial structure and his body or something like that. He looks so much creepier than the version in All Hallows Eve. Now, again, I haven't watched All Hallows Eve, so I can't really compare. But visually, the guy playing him now, whose name I know I've seen, but it's not stuck in my head yet, he's nailing it, the look. And I did hear that he was a mime, like he'd actually studied mime. So a lot of the little facial expressions, the smiles, the stares, I mean, that plays into the character and makes him a lot more fascinating because you don't know what he's thinking. You don't know what he's doing. He's just fucking with people. Like the restaurant scene, he's just staring at the girl and he gives her the dead stare with the blank expression, staring. And you're just like, what is he doing? And then he just smiles and did it. And all that worked. And so for the character of Art the Clown, I like that character. I can see how this could be a future horror icon as time goes on, because I don't want to say he's a horror icon right now. I feel like you have to earn that. But I can't see any reason why he couldn't earn that status, because there is just something memorable about him. And I think that's one of the things that makes a horror icon. So many filmmakers today are trying to make the next big horror icon. They're trying to do something, but there's just something about him, whether they meant to or not. And I like to believe that if you're not trying to, that's when you nail it. Because you're not worried about, oh, what could we do to make him iconic? They just said, well, slap a clown suit on him and kind of do something with the mask, and then bam, we got it. So you're not thinking about that. You're just trying to make this character that you've created as creepy as possible.
Yeah.
And then everything about him just kind of comes together. So every horror icon we've had since, there's something about it that just works and clicks, and that's why it's an icon. So the movie as a whole, this is where I was kind of like, meh. There was nothing about it that just made me go, oh my God, this was groundbreaking and mind-blowing. It was just a clown going on a murdering spree.
Yeah.
There was nothing else about it that just made it stand out. So that's why I wasn't really blown away by the movie as a whole. I liked the character. I wasn't aggravated with the the other characters like in other movies where they just get on your nerves. Like I honestly I liked how they progressed a lot of the main characters, like the one girl. You were kind of following her for a time, the one who was kind of terrorizing in the restaurant. And you thought, okay, well, this is our final girl. And then, spoilers, she dies halfway through, and then her sister becomes the person we follow from that point on. But then how they looped around, I guess this was the one more fascinating element to it, is how they looped the beginning and the end back around. Yeah. And I thought, oh, okay, well, that's cool. So little things like that I thought were interesting. I still don't understand why he was eating her face. Because, there was never a moment where he seemed like he was a cannibal of any kind. And
well, they kind of, it won't spoil anything, but he does do a lot more biting in the second film. All he even eats someone's heart.
Ooh, wow.
Yeah.
All right.
So that was the thing about the first one for me too. My expectation when I went in was I knew that Art the Clown was just going to be going on a killing spree, and so I was like, I'm just going to watch how messed up this clown is.
Yeah.
And because he's such a he's a likable character because of how just evil he is. That's what I love about him. He doesn't talk, but he does have the expression. It's like you're getting Freddy Krueger and Jason together.
Yeah.
He doesn't talk, but he's got a lot of expression, and it just adds for the character. You don't need a reason why Art's doing it. You just know, oh, Art's going on a killing spree.
And I even liked how there was that one moment, I think, when he had finally caught up with the first main girl, and he just had enough and went and got the gun.
and just bam.
Yeah, it was just like, God damn it, bam. And it was just like he was just done chasing her. It was like, shit, all right, just get this over with. So that that to me was a little fascinating and didn't really lend itself toward any kind of supernatural element, which I've, as you've mentioned and I've heard, there is more of a supernatural bent to the second one, which I guess this is my question to you. Do you feel like that detracts from the character at all?
Honestly, so at the end of the first film, we have our little bit of a supernatural thing because Art, I don't know if it's right at the end of the movie or if it's in like a credit scene, but the lights flicker and Art comes up and he had gotten shot, he had got shot in the head. Mm-hmm. So right there, that kind of added that supernatural element for me. The second movie follows Art, but it also follows this other family. So this family, and this won't spoil the film for you if I tell you about this aspect of it. There's a girl in the movie who is like, she's designing a costume. Her dad drew photos of like characters and things like that. And she's designing a costume based off of one of the characters that her dad had designed. Well, her brother is obsessed with Art the Clown. He's obsessed with all of this stuff. Well, come to find out, the sketchbook that the dad had gotten like really sick, and the dad ends up dying. Like, you don't see that on screen. That's all off screen. Well, the dad had actually drawn Art the Clown, and he had drawn some of the murders that happened like before they happened. And you find out in this like roundabout way that this girl is supposed to be basically the yin to Art's yang. Like it's got like a like a Dungeons and Dragons type feel to it, sort of. this is the best way I can describe it. It legit screams like 80s cheesy, like cheesy action movie, like Masters of the Universe almost.
Oh, wow.
Like the relationship between her and Art the Clown in it.
Mm-hmm.
But the supernatural aspect, I think it actually adds to the lore of Art. And at the end of the movie, there's a post-credit scene that really just it made me go, what is going on here? And it's a really twisted scene, and it actually involves the girl from the first film who got her face chewed off. But Art's even meaner in this movie. I mean, he decapitates somebody, and then there's trick-or-treaters at one of the doors, and he opens the door, and he's got candy in this decapitated head. And the people think it's just a Halloween prop.
Mm-hmm.
And he passes candy out to these kids in this girl's decapitated skull. It's got a lot going on in it. And unlike in the first movie, I feel like the first movie was kind of a slow burn.
Yeah.
Just in the essence that he was stalking just the one girl throughout most of the film. This movie, he's going to different houses. He's attacking different people. I mean, there's a scene where he's whipping the girl's brother, and he's doing his like silent laugh that he does,
Mm-hmm.
and he's just having a great time with it. And they even show when he wakes up at the morgue, and it's hilarious, like how morbid I am. It's hilarious because he rips out the mortician's eyeball,
Mm-hmm.
and where he's missing his eye because he got shot, he puts the eye in there. And then he turns and the eyes bulged out, and he's like, oh, and he scares the shit out of the guy who's, dying. And then he pulls the eyeball out, and he does his thing, and then he's all done.
Right.
But it's they added a lot of blood, they added a lot of brutality. And speaking of that, what did you think of? Did you think it was a pretty mean movie, or were you pretty like were you like this is mean, but it's not too bad?
I think based on everything that I'd heard about it prior, with those expectations, when I saw it, I could see where people could say it was mean and it was kind of brutal, but I wasn't like, oh my God. It was just like, I mean, yeah, it's, it's vicious, but I didn't feel that it was just so grotesque, which is why I wanted to kind of ask you with Terrifier 2, if my assessment was probably correct about the audiences who are fainting and throwing up being casual, because when I watched Terrifier, there was never a moment where I was like, oh man, that was too much, because like the girl getting sawed in half, that was brutal. But I wasn't watching it going, oh my God, this is just too much, because all the effects to me they were good, but there was that lack of realism, you know what I mean? It looked good, but there was that,
and that's with it being an indie film, and I think they do that on purpose.
Yeah, and
that way
it works.
That way, true, like people who like the true hardcore horror fans who are used to the really like fantastic effects where it's really brutal and everything. When they go in and they see a movie like this, it's not, the effects aren't as crazy as a big budget film,
Mm-hmm.
and so. For people like us, it's like, yeah, that was brutal, and yeah, this movie is mean, but it's not over the top mean. But yes, after seeing Terrifier 2, I can safely say that I can see why normal audiences might struggle a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
If you're somebody like one of us who goes in and you're used to seeing people get decapitated and everything, and seeing all the violence and everything, then yeah, it's not gonna bother you.
Sure.
I mean, there's even a scene in it where he brutally attacks this girl, and he cuts off. It's the girl whose head he cuts off, and he scoops out her brain,
Mm-hmm.
so he can put the candy in her skull. But he takes a scalpel and he cuts off scissors. Sorry, he takes scissors and he cuts off the top of her scalp. He stabs her in the back. He rips off skin off of her, and it's like really fucked up. Like he even rips one of her arms off,
Mm-hmm.
and he leaves, and she's crawling to try to get to her phone, and then he runs in like an excited kid who got a new toy, and he's got bleach and salt.
Goddamn.
And he comes in, and he pours the bleach all over, And then he starts pouring the salt on her, and then he pours it in his hand, and he throws it up to make it rain on top of her, and then he pours a bunch in his hand, and he just smears it into her back. You know, even to me, I'm like, oh, God, I can only imagine how bad that is.
Yeah.
If I was somebody that wasn't so big into horror and I went in and I watched him even do that, I'd probably be like, oh, God, that's gross.
Yeah.
You know, just because of what's happening. But it's fantastic. I thought it really added to the lore of the character. The only thing with it that I kind of wish would have been a little different is I get keeping things mysterious, but there were a few things that I wanted just a few more answers to. Like, again, this is not a spoiler, and if you get the chance to look it up, it's fantastic. Art is in a laundromat at one part. He washes his outfit in a laundromat at one point. And he looks back, and there's a little girl, and she's dressed like Art the Clown. She's a twisted clown just like him. And she's sitting there, and he watches her, and she basically has diarrhea all over the chair.
Yeah.
Well, you know, they have to add to the gross factor.
Sure.
And he smiles about it, and then he's playing patty cake with this girl. Well, there's a guy that was asleep in the laundromat, and he opens his eyes, and he sees Art the Clown, naked, playing patty cake with nobody. Like, Art's imagining this girl.
Okay.
But these other kids can see the girl. And honestly, if they put the little girl in another movie with him, she's going to become iconic too, just because the look that they have for her is just amazing. But yeah, no, I enjoyed Terrifier 2. The movie only had a $250,000 budget, I think they said.
Yeah.
And it has earned over $7 million in the box office.
It blew up.
Which is going to put it on quite a high pedestal, because if you think about it, there's only one other indie film, and a lot of people forget this. It's technically an indie film that did really well like that, and that's Halloween.
Yeah.
The original Halloween was an indie film. I think it had a slightly bigger budget. I think it might have had like maybe $1 million budget. Or might have been like $500,000. I can't remember off the top of my head, but
It's fairly meager.
it did really well as well. So no, I think Art the Clown is around to stay, and I'm actually really excited about it. The actor that plays him, I'm excited to see him in more things. It's going to be interesting to see this new Grinch film that's coming out. It's called The Mean One.
Oh, yeah. I did remember.
The horror movie version of The Grinch, which I finally got a synopsis for the story for it. Apparently, the story is going to be 20 years ago, Cindy Lou Who saw her parents get murdered by the Mean One, by the Grinch. And after 20 years, she is going to seek out revenge to kill him before he can cause any more death.
Okay.
So, I don't know. I'm going to dig it. You know, it's on my watch list, as well as, you know, Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, which apparently is going to get a limited theatrical release.
I guess.
Well, and it's one of those things. I love when films are self-aware. Like, they know that it's a stretch, that it's going to be super big and super successful, but they have fun with it.
Yeah.
And I think that's why Terrifier has done so well. I think the people that made it are having fun with it. And I think that is why the film does... I think that's why the films have done so well. The first one is starting to get more people watching it because of the second one. And the second one is just doing phenomenal. And you can tell that, you know, yes, it doesn't have the best special effects. Some of the acting's a little cheesy. But it's just fun.
Yeah.
It's fun in a morbid way. And I don't know who does casting for Terrifier. I thought the girl who survived most of the first Terrifier, I thought she was really cute. And the girl that they hired to be the main girl in this new movie, who goes around in some skimpy looking armor costume that she made, yeah, she's really attractive too. And yeah, Art loves to murder the main girls. He loves to murder their best friends in brutal ways.
Seems like it.
That's for sure. But yeah, it's over the top. It's violent. It's got a lot of just crazy scenes. There's a scene where there's a kid it's the brother. He's like 12, 13, so he's an older kid. But he's knocked out, and Art's like snapping at him, trying to get him to wake up. He's smacking his hands together, and the kid's not doing anything. Well, the kid wakes up to chewing sounds, and Art is eating his hand just for the fun of it. And then when he tries to run, Art grabs his legs and bites like where his Achilles tendon would be, like at the back there.
No, that right there, that's a no-no for me.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't like focus on it, but you do know, like, you know where he's biting him at.
Yeah. Surprised they didn't show it.
Yeah, I mean, they show him biting in, but they don't like show him pulling the tendon or anything, but he's biting him.
Yep.
Yeah, it's brutal. I mean, there's even like a shotgun to the face, and then he shoves like food into the face hole, acting like he's feeding the person. Like, it's just, yeah. I can see why general audiences would be like, oh god.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm glad you watched Terrifier. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely, if you end up, I did the 7-day free trial to watch Terrifier 2. If you end up doing that and you watch it, you have to let me know on that one as well what you think. I feel like it might be a little bit of a miss for you, just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I think you'll enjoy it, but I think you're gonna be. I don't want to say that you're gonna be let down by it, but just know that its pacing is a lot faster and art is kind of all over the place. But I think that's because they wanted to add to the body count,
Right.
and they wanted to show the brutality of him. But if you go into it with the mindset of, I'm going to watch Art the Clown do a bunch of messed up stuff, you'll probably enjoy it from that aspect, because it's legitimately just him being him.
Okay.
And there's no boobs in it.
Oh.
Yeah. The only scene where you see any nudity is the main girl is in the shower, and you get like a side shot, and she's thicker than a Snicker. Just going to put that out there. But yeah, no, and you know, I was surprised that they didn't do that, because a lot of movies, like, that's what they bank on. They're like, we're going to put some attractive women in here. They'll get naked, and then you'll be like, yeah. Oh, and he does stab some guy in the dick multiple times.
Okay.
And then I think he rips it off, if I remember correctly.
God damn.
Yeah. He's brutal. And it's just, he's here to stay. And the way that they did Terrifier 2, I could see there being a Terrifier 3. I just hope the people that do it don't get too big to where they're like, we're gonna hire a whole new special effects team. We're gonna do this. It being gritty like it is helps it.
Yeah.
It makes it work. So.
And see, I think one of the biggest complaints that I've seen as far as reviews go for the movie is people saying that this felt like it was too bloated, because it has a 2-hour runtime, does it not? Or a little over 2 hours? And
yeah, I think it's just slightly over 2 hours.
Yeah, and that feels, I don't know, extreme for a horror film, especially a horror film of that magnitude.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I mean, I don't even know how many kills he technically got in it, because you kind of follow the stories of the kids a little bit, and it's not like overfilled though with following the family's story. You know, you kind of follow. You follow the kids through part of it. You see Art, then you kind of follow the kids again. Then you stick with Art for a little while, and then it's kind of like a pattern. Mm-hmm. There's a really weird dream sequence. The girl has a dream about Art the Clown, and it's like Art the Clown has his own like TV show, and it's called like the Clown Cafe, and they sing a song, and it's like he kills everybody on the set. Mm-hmm. But it's like a whole dream sequence, and like he lights a woman on fire who's playing a banjo, and she's still playing the banjo while she's on fire. It's just like really, there's a lot of imagery in it that's just kind of trippy, but it does like follow the kids back to Art, follow the kids back to Art, but it's not anything too hard to follow or anything like that. Like it's a pattern that I think worked for it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'm sitting there watching it, and toward the end of it, I was like looking and seeing what time it was, and I was like, is this movie really this long? But it didn't feel bloated. Like if they would have stretched out the first movie to be 2 hours, I don't know if I would have been able to do it, because the first movie, the pacing is a lot slower, but it's building up to it. This movie went in with the mindset of, well, we've already established who Art the Clown is. A lot of the people that saw this have probably seen the first movie, and so they stretch it out to just show the violent aspect of things.
Right.
And I think that kind of lent it. I cannot talk today. I think that sort of helped the film get to the point that it has gotten to.
Gotcha.
But no, I enjoyed it. Definitely on the watch list. I'll probably get it when it comes out, because they're releasing it on 4K, I believe.
Oh, nice.
So I'll probably end up getting it.
Okay.
But speaking of horror films, how you feeling about horror these days? I know we've talked about horror. I mean, that's what we do. We talk about horror. Mm-hmm. We've talked about what horror means to us. You know, we did it in our first episode. It was, talking about why we're horror fans, what it means to us. But the genre as a whole, I feel like things are changing. The way that we're getting content is changing. Indie films are, as we've just talked about, getting really popular. But yeah, how are you feeling about horror these days?
I guess the best way I could describe it is concerned a little bit, because there are elements that I'm excited to see happening for horror, and then there are other elements that I've always noticed over the past few years that bother me about it, because it's a genre that we both grew up on. It's something that we just connected to for some visceral reason. It really makes me wonder why I gravitated toward it, because going back to, I think, my original stories, I had a rough time with it early on. Like a movie like Jaws could make me physically get ill. I was a child, but it gave me that reaction. Same with Nightmare on Elm Street. The first time I saw Tina go up on the ceiling, I was like, oh my God. And I had a visceral reaction. I can watch it now and I'm like, no big deal. I can't remember the last time I've had a visceral reaction. Human Centipede 2. And I didn't vomit, but it was just like, the whole kind of holding your head, just catching a breath going, Jesus Christ, man. But today, where horror is, it seems more popular than ever. It doesn't feel like some passing fad that, just you and your friends are kind of secretly whispering about, being like, oh man, did you see that awesome movie over there? We've got multiple streaming services for horror. That seems unheard of. I think when Shudder was even starting, that was like, oh, that's interesting. Their selections may not have been the best at the time, but now, they have originals that they post on there. Without Shudder, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to see Psycho Goreman or Fried Berry. Vicious Fun was a good one. They've got a lot of originals over there. I'm probably forgetting a few more that slipped my mind, but there's a good outlet for it. And that being said, I also feel like that there are so many people out there who do not understand it, who find a way, I guess they have more money than we do and time, that they can go and make some of the most ridiculous, shitty horror films, that the market is flooded with them. And I think that's part of the problem that I have, is that you go looking and there are so many. You go on Tubi and you look under the horror section. There are over 1,000. I shit you not. Over 1,000 you can find on that service alone. Quality-wise, that's hit or miss. I'd probably say you're going to have this is even being generous, over 50% of them are going to be garbage. And I say garbage in the sense that you're just watching going, what the fuck is going on? What are you doing? And it's just, you had people who had money, who had friends, and they said, hey, we're going to make a horror movie. We're going to get famous. And that's the problem. They're not thinking about what is the thing that you're trying to do with this horror film other than we're going to be famous. You don't have a good idea. You don't have a concept or grasp of what the genre is or how to make a movie. You just had money. You thought this is a great get-rich-quick scheme, and you're going to try to create the next big horror icon so you can be famous, and you churn out some turd that was not worth the celluloid it's printed on. And there are so many like that it becomes kind of a wasteland trying to find the good ones. That's why I passed on Terrifier for so long, because I thought it was just another one of these cheap indie, films. I say indie very loosely. That was an indie film. Some of the other schlock is far from it. And it's things like that make it hard for movies like this to find an audience. And I'm glad that Terrifier found an audience. And I'm glad that it does seem like something with great quality can rise to the top, even if it took a while, because that movie had been out for several years.
Yeah.
2016,
I believe.
2016, that's what I was thinking. So, you think about that, 6 years, and the sequel's just now coming out. And before that, there were the shorts that the man made. So he had been trying to get this character. He believed in this character enough that he wanted to showcase it. He wanted to make it work, and he kept playing with that character and working with it until it finally did pop. And that, to me, I mean, you could look at that as, someone with some money and time just trying to force that on the world. But no, he believed in the character enough that he wasn't going to let it go. He was passionate about the character. He wasn't just trying to do, like I said, get rich quick, get famous because of this character. He loved this character he made, and he wanted to refine it.
And I think that's what it boils down to. I just to piggyback off what you said real quick. I firmly believe that is one of the biggest problems. Even the studios are doing it now. They're putting out films at such a alarming rate, and they're remaking things, and it's all about, let's make us some money really quick. We can make 1 million remakes, and people will come see it because it's associated with the original. And that kind of scares me with the future of the horror genre just a little bit. I feel like it's an easy genre to make films for a lot of people, and it turns into a quantity over quality thing.
Sure.
And I agree with you 100% when you say it's a get rich quick scheme to a lot of people, and it kills me because there are so many films that do go unnoticed that are really good. Another film that I wouldn't say it's an indie film, but it wasn't like a full-fledged big picture. It had some big names in it, and that was Trick or Treat.
Mm-hmm.
Trick or Treat was fantastic, and when you find out that the man who wrote it, and I believe he directed it too.
Yeah, Michael Dougherty.
He created the character of Sam as a doodle, as a drawing when he was in college.
Mm-hmm.
He did an animated short. He loves that character. That character is his baby. I watched an interview. They were talking to some people on the set of the film while they were filming, and they all said the same thing. Sam is his baby. That is the character that he loves the most. And you see that in the movie, because that movie did a fantastic job of putting all these stories together and connecting them all to Sam. And with horror being on the rise again, like it has over the last few years, and with these films getting noticed, they're talking about the sequel again.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they talked about a sequel to it after it had come out. They were talking about a sequel because it did pretty well, and then it kind of got put on the back burner, and now they're talking about it again. That's another character that I think could become a horror icon. He's already become pretty iconic over the last few years. Yeah. And I think that's the one thing that kind of scares me with the horror genre right now, is we're not getting as many icons. I know it took a long time for, Jason and Michael Myers and Leatherface and Freddy. It took them a while to become iconic. It took a few movies for them to become iconic. But I feel like we are losing that idea of icons. Like, everybody is still obsessed with those original icons. We're not getting as many original icons. You occasionally get, your Captain Spaulding and your Sam. You get these characters that are iconic to you, that become iconic. But as of late, nobody has really come into 80s slasher status. And it's just because I don't think horror movies are being made quite like they were back then.
Well, you know what? I'm going to actually argue on this defense for it being the originality of it all. Okay?
Yeah.
You take a look back to, now granted, these are characters pre-film, but have become iconic because of film. Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, the Wolfman, the Mummy. Look how many movies have been made with those characters, especially now that they are public domain. So people can yank them and say, I'm going to make a Dracula movie. I'm going to make a, Mummy movie. I'm going to make this, all because it's convenient. So everybody can do that. And I think because they have such an iconic status, everyone thinks that, well, I've got a twist to it. I'll put them in the future, or I'll change this one little detail. I mean, Christ, we're getting another Dracula remake out of Renfield, with Nicolas Cage and all that. And say what you want about it. I mean, I'll give it a moment of my time, depending on, because I like the cast, exclusion of Nicolas Cage. He's all right. I can't. That's just my preference. I know people like.
He's Nick Cage.
Yeah. But there again, we see yet another Dracula film being made. Now, granted, they're saying, well, it's called Renfield, so we're going to focus on Renfield. Yeah, but you're still doing a Dracula movie. The Invisible Man, I'll give that a lot of credit. Lee Wanell did a fantastic job with that remake back in, 2020, I think is when it came out, with Elizabeth Moss. That was fascinating because what they did is they took the idea of the Invisible Man and put a bent, on it, where it was, what if they made you question whether or not he was even real, like if this was psychological. So it became this real deep, like, what do you call it? Oh, there's the term that I'm looking for. Gaslighting. Like the whole movie is fucking gaslighting you. And it's exactly what he was doing to her. So we're all, wondering, it's like, is she crazy? Are we crazy? Is he that? Because we don't know. But the way they present it, it's fascinating. So it was a nice twist on it. But it's still not an original idea. Original in the sense of how they approached it. And that's where I give it a lot of credit. Original on how they approached it. Even though you could say it's not original because it's the Invisible Man, whatever. But we'll call it an original idea. And with people trying to get, like Halloween we just saw got ended, and we saw how divisive that is. Friday the 13th is apparently getting a prequel series now on Peacock, where I guess we're following Pamela, or I don't know. They haven't really given a lot of details. The people behind it, Brian Fuller, he's done a lot of great television.
You should be a writer on that show. Just saying.
I would love to. So I'm curious to see what they do with that. But again, it's like you said, they won't let these icons go. It's like, well, we have to. I don't know if we had said this or if I was talking to Katrina about it, but we're honestly on the fence with Halloween. The series needs to be done. Okay, you've created multiple timelines at this point. The series has a finality to it. Be done. Let it rest. Friday the 13th, as much as I would love to see another, there's also a part where I could say, well, you know what? They got him off world. He's on another planet. We're done with him. There's a closure to it. So end it. Bookend it. Freddy's had an end. He's done. I'd love to see more of that. But do we need it? Maybe, maybe not. It just depends on how are you going to approach it now? With Jason, Freddy, they've not had the branching off timeline. So I feel like they have a little bit more wiggle room to play with where you could do something a little different. Maybe you could play with some of the timelines and say, all right, but what if from this point and go? I would love to see that. Okay. Like I know where Heather Langenkamp was talking about coming back. So play with that. Maybe Nightmare on Elm Street 1 is all that happened. And then what happens if none of the other movies happen? Go. I don't know. It could be fascinating. Or maybe it sucks. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. Like that was the whole reason. And I hate when I talk about this because I bring it up a lot on the show, and I don't want people to think I'm tooting my own horn. When I did the idea that I had done, it was building upon what already existed, but doing something new.
Exactly.
Ending a story. Like, you need to end a story if you're going to tell a new story. And I know that Halloween Ends tried to do that.
And yes, that's what it did. It did something different.
And people are divisive on it, but I will give them respect for trying to create a new story. Because that's the thing. These characters, we've had them for so long. And I get it. I would love to, I would see Nightmare on Elm Street 20, Friday the 13th 20. Like, I would see any sequel they would come out with. Because I love the characters. But at some point, it's like, these characters have been around for so long, give them a breather. Like, they need a break.
Yeah.
End the story if you want to end it. But, if you want to keep telling a story, tell a new story.
Yeah.
Change it. Make it something different.
And I think that's part of the problem with this divisiveness that I'm seeing, that bugs me when people are just like, this movie sucks, this movie's stupid. You have a right to have your opinion. And I'm not going to sit there and say that anyone who didn't like Halloween or the new trilogy is wrong, okay? I respect that you have your feelings on it. I get it, but at least give me reasons why. If all you're saying is, well, it's stupid, that you're not selling me on it, because people want to sit there and talk about, we need original concepts, we need original ideas, and yet when someone does something original, especially with existing characters, they hate it. But you look
Yeah.
at a movie like Barbarian, came out, and I've seen splits down the middle with that, where people said, these characters are fucking stupid. They're dumb. Why are they doing these things? But you know what? It's an original idea. And did you ever stop to think for a moment that this is an exercise in maybe ignoring red flags? Because I'm pretty positive that was the premise behind the story.
Yeah.
That's what the director or the writer said. It was like, you know, what if this person just ignored every red flag that was coming down their way, and then they just stretched it out for 90 minutes? And it was original. It was something new. I enjoyed it because of that. It's something I had not seen. And regardless of stupid decisions, I mean, they were no stupider than any other movie we've seen. You know, I wasn't sitting there watching this film go, oh my God, that is just absolutely dumb. I'm just like, yeah, this is a horror movie. Of course they're going to go do that thing. You know, I didn't feel that their decisions were any more or less stupider than anything we've seen. So the fact that we get some of these remakes and requels or whatever, it's because people want these things. But then when you bitch and complain that it's not what you wanted, I don't know what to tell you. You know, that's what bothers me about this. Again, the state of horror as it is. Original ideas are either, you know, cash grab garbage, or the truly original great ideas go overlooked and are, you know, frowned upon. And especially when a horror icon is involved, that's when it really gets scrutinized. Yeah. So I don't know what people want in this group, and I've even said that I honestly thought at one point that the horror community was a great community. Halloween Ends started to prove me wrong, because you know, people have been hateful in the video game community just over the stupidest shit. Yeah. And suddenly Halloween Ends brought that level of stupidity out on people, and I don't understand why you feel the need to attack people because they like something you didn't, or vice versa. You know, we can all enjoy our own things. You know, there are going to be some people who don't like Terrifier or like Terrifier 2. That's fine. It's not your bag, you know?
Well, guys, we are a little close to an hour, or right about at an hour. So we're going to take a break, and we're going to break this episode into 2 episodes. But before we do that, Steven's going to let you guys know where to find us. So go ahead, Steven.
As always, you know, let us know how you're feeling about whatever we're talking about. We're talking about the state of horror, and we're going to be talking about that again next week. Let us know how you're feeling about things on Twitter at Horror Ramblings. And if you've got more to say and a tweet just won't do, send us an email at horrorramblings@gmail.com. If you love social media groups, you can follow us on Facebook and chat with fellow horror fans like yourself. You can also do that on Discord. We have a little Horror Ramblers room. You can discuss horror stuff with fellow horror fans like yourself. Find us on Instagram to see an assortment of horror images. And if you're feeling generous and you want to support the show, you can head on over to patreon.com/pencil and paper productions to chuck in a buck and help this and other shows like it grow. And if you want to say nice things about the show, head on over to Apple Podcasts, leave that beautiful 5-star review. You can do the very same thing on Spotify if you're so inclined. Answer our questions and polls if you want to. It's all appreciated. But most importantly, tell your fellow horror fiends to search Horror Ramblings on the preferred podcasting platform. If nothing else, keep up with any and all things at pencilandpaperproductions.com/horror-ramblings. Links are in the show notes for your convenience.
And remember, guys, stay spooky out there.
This has been the Horror Ramblings podcast. Join us next time for even more.
This has been a Pencil and Paper Podcast Network production.